Chop, chop. Hello, hi. That took me a little while. Actually. Wait, no. Let's see. All right, I'll give it a couple of minutes and see if anyone joins. If nobody joins, I'm probably not going to answer all these questions. Jake's sitting in the wings and he can hear what I'm saying, so I'm not going to talk completely to myself, but we'll see. Right, I'll give it another minute or so. I wonder if... Right, I'll give it a minute and I'll get cracking on this. There we go. Sausages. There we go. You're keeping me company on the M1. Perfect. At least I know when I'm talking to you here. That helps me. Okay, right. Right, so I'm mostly going to do these Q&As to try and get some stuff to put out onto the normal channel. So even if I'm speaking to nobody, I don't really care too much. So I asked yesterday if anybody had any questions or topics they wanted me to cover. So I'm going to go over the questions. Some of them are ropey. Some of them are a little bit more controversial than others. But this just gives me a chance to vent on some of the topics that people are asking me on or people are giving opinions on, and I can pull some clips from them and then pull them into here. So there are 8 questions so far that I'm going to go through. Some of them might take a little bit longer than others, but I'll crack through them. And if you are one of the 3 people that are watching, chuck a comment into the thing if you agree or disagree. Some of the questions were quite good from yesterday, so I'm excited to get tucked into a couple of them. So first question we've got on the list is from Jonathan. So we've got, how do you decide when your gym is at capacity? Which was a great question. So for anybody that doesn't know, I announced before Christmas that we were going to go on to like a blackout for New Year for CrossFit Tweedbank for members. So we weren't going to bring any new members on. And so there's a few things that play into that. So the way that you can get around being at capacity for members is you can put on more classes, or you can, in my opinion, degrade the quality of the service that you've got in your gym. And that is by putting more people into the classes. Now, how do you even know when you think you're getting close to capacity? Well, there's a couple of things on that. One is waitlists start to build. People start to complain that they can't get into the classes. There's just kind of, it starts creaking at the seams a little bit. Now, Talking to the more classes thing, we have many coaches and a big space, and we would be able to put on 12 classes a day, right? Between the coaches, between me, between the space that we've got, between program, between everything, we've got the facilities to be able to put on 12, 13 classes a day. However, you're always thwarted with the fact that peak times will always be peak times. And unless you're very selective with who you allow into your gym, you've got no idea who's going to train and when. So you're 6 a.m., maybe even 7 a.m., 9:30 after school drop-offs, the 1:30 or the lunchtime class, the 5 o'clock, the 5 p.m., 6 p.m. So those classes are always going to be full to the brim. They're always going to be popular no matter what you do. And there's no way that you can get round that. So with that in mind, putting on more classes, not really an option to take in more people. Then you've got degrade the quality of service, in my opinion. And that means that you would allow more people into the classes. Now, I'm going to say this for the first time, like out loud, that we put the classes from 14 up to 16. And in my opinion, I think 16 is too many. There's the guys on Best Hour of Your Day or Jason Arkham and Co. They think that for the space that I've got, it's massive. I have more kit and more space than most people that do what I do. But with that in mind, it doesn't mean that you can coach just as effectively with more people. It doesn't mean that you don't degrade the quality of service. And I pride that being the thing that we've got. We don't have at CrossFit 2 Bank, if you talk a 50, 100-mile radius or whatever, we don't have the best looking, the highest end equipment, the nicest looking space, the most aesthetic thing. We don't have any of that. But what we do have, in my opinion, and I'd be more than happy to bash it out with somebody if they thought otherwise, we have the best coaching standard and the best programming quality, right? And that's from a data perspective. We spend more time, as far as I know, on the programming and on the coaching development than anyone, right? So with that in mind, we have that. And so therefore, I don't see the need to have to degrade the quality to just get more people in the door. Now, you'd think when you're at capacity, why would you want more members? Okay, so that's one question. I'm in a unique position where I have a full-time job. I don't need to take a wage from this. And I would get it if somebody wanted to make a bit more money and they were an owner and this was their full-time gig. So let's say, do we need more money? No, we break even, right? So we break even, the space pays for itself. And if I'm happy enough with that, then why would I want more members? Yes, there's something to be said for, do I want to help more people? Yes, absolutely. But if I want to help more people, I can do that elsewhere in another realm. If we were saying that I wanted more money for the space, I personally wouldn't want to degrade the quality of the service just because we wanted snazzier, fancier kit, because at the crux of what we do is the programming and the coaching. So not only are we at capacity from, I don't think we need any more members, we don't need to make the money. So the only thing is, can I help more people? And I think there's other mechanisms and other ways to do that besides that. So I guess that's the whole thing. We don't have the snazziest kit. We don't have the most upmarket stuff that's in there. The stuff works, it does its job. But for me, you're paying for the quality of service that you get. And we've got that in spades. And so therefore, back to the original question, how do you know we're at capacity? It starts to creak. You degrade the quality of the service if you were to add more people into the classes. And I'm just not willing to do that at the moment. So that's how we kind of decided that we're at capacity. You hear little grumbles, you see the wait lists build, you see all that type of stuff. Have you considered having 2 coaches for one big class? So yes, I have, but I think then you're just kind of diluting it down slightly. And it's more of a space thing, right? We're in a premium market for coaching, right? And we're in a premium service market with CrossFit. It's better than anything, and that comes at a premium. And therefore, I'd want there to be space. I don't want to be partnered up in every single workout. I don't want to have 2 square meters in every single thing. I want to have a lot of space. I want to have for 2 reasons. Even if there's 2 coaches, but you've got loads and loads of people in the space. If I'm looking across, I don't want 6 bodies between me and the person that I'm looking at. I'd rather it was 2, and it's easier for me to see them, easier to, see a fault or see a correction from across the room, be able to walk across and make it that way. So I have considered trying 2 coaches, but I just think, and it's just from my personal experience, I consider myself to be a very good coach. And although our values and coaching standards are aligned between me and the other coaches, we're always going to give different cues and different corrections. That's good and bad. But in one class, I sometimes think if you had one person that was saying one coach what one cue because they thought it would fix an error, and from a person who is, an athlete or a member in a gym, if they get one cue, sometimes if they get another cue and they've been given two separate faults, because me and even another very high quality coach, you could have both of us, we could look at the athlete, see an error, and have two different corrections for it. Now, one of them, they might both work to fix it, but from an athlete perspective and how much you can take in, I'm not entirely sure that does that. I think that might do more harm than good when you're given two corrections, two cues to the same correction, for example. So there's lots of pros and lots of cons to it, but I think for me just now, I'm very happy with the number that we've got. It becomes very obvious when you're at capacity, and it's not a question you need to ask until you need to ask it. And when you need to ask it, you will know. And that's my thing. But the overarching theme is we know what we're good at, programming and coaching. We don't need, quote unquote, need the money. So I wouldn't degrade the quality of service for that. And we want to stop all the wait lists. Putting on other classes doesn't really work because we don't hit the peak times and so on. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. Hopefully that explained that for Jonathan. Not kind of, I'm always going to go off on a tangent. I'm going to try and not do it in too many of these questions, or we'll be here for 45 hours. So that's the first one. Right. The next one we've got is, in fact, I'll leave the Hyrox one to the end because every time I come on here, I seem to just be chatting shit about Hyrox. But so the next one is, do you feel straps should only be used for maxing out? Based on the profile, I think this is a Olympic weightlifter, Stu, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm somebody who's never used straps for Olympic weightlifting. I see high-level athletes do it on snatches and whatever else. I've never quite understood how you don't break your wrists or thumbs with shit like that, but just here for the beard, nice, like it's D. Yeah, so I've never really understood the need for them. I get them. I think that for strongman training, I use them a lot. I don't think they should be used for only for maxing out. And the reason that I say that is you don't want grip to be the limiter for how much you can lift as far as volume's concerned. So let's take this into account. Say from a hypertrophy or development point of view, I wanted to give you 4 sets of 6 reps, right? I wouldn't want grip to be the limiter on your 3rd and 4th set just for the sake of it. Now, there's 2 sides to this. You'll get one side of people who say, you'll develop your grip at the same length of time, whatever. For me, there's other ways to train grip. There's more effective ways to train grip than just the exercise. Let's take a deadlift, for example. There's better ways to train grip than just doing a deadlift. You're not going to get to the top end of your deadlift where you really want to gain stimulus, where you really want to get the intensity part. You're not going to get that if your grip gives up first. So I'd rather get the adaptation to the stimulus at the top end of the deadlift rather than do that. Well, hook grip for life is fair. But for the strongman stuff, I've been doing axle deadlifts. And if you can hook grip an axle bar, I'd be very stunned and very shook and very surprised. You'd have to have mammoth hands. But yeah, so I think straps, I'd love somebody to chat me through that uses them for Olympic lifts. But hook grip, I think, is sufficient, especially when it gets to a level. If you're somebody who's maybe new to it and your lifts are at a point where grip degrades your ability to be able to, I don't know, snatch pull heavy or clean pull heavy, then maybe. But I think that most people, for the most part, aren't at a point where they need straps for Olympic lifts because their weights aren't quite heavy enough. Only in my experience. I've not coached any elite level Olympic weightlifters, only kind of advanced, if you like, advanced middle ground, talking like 120 snatch and maybe 160 clean and jerk. So not elite, but that high level. And I've never needed to use straps in their training to be able to get up. I think there would be an argument for it if I had an athlete where all of the things I use in my toolbox, the straps for weightlifting, yeah, they're different from regular straps for sure. But I just think I've never, if I came to a point, the things that I've got, the tools that I've got in my box, I don't mean as tools as in straps and stuff. I mean the tools as in the programming things and the progressive overload and all that type of stuff. They've never not worked. And if they didn't work, then I would explore other avenues, and straps might be one of them. But for now, I've never needed them. And when I get to a point that somebody hits a a max where they can no longer add on to the level I think they're going to add on, that's something that I'd probably approach. But to your original point, do I feel they'd only be used for maxing out? No, and yes, and no. It depends on the lift, I would say. So I like this question. Pete, Mr. Adonis, 400 foot tall man. How many attempts at a PB before you call it quits? I had a little look about last night for any type of research on this, and there is next to none, which makes sense because it's quite a nuanced topic. An old coach of mine from a million years ago said, give it 3. And he would always say, give it 3. And if you chin 3, then leave it at that. Now, there's no basis for this. I think it's completely subjective. There's probably an argument where you could look at degradation of potential output based on cumulative load or cumulative output previous, which you could maybe link, but I couldn't find anything that was close enough last night when I was looking on PubMed stuff. Because you could think, how much of your ability to move a weight do you lose by trying to max out? Six attempts. There's no way I'm doing 6 attempts. If you can have 6 attempts on a lift, I don't think you're anywhere near your genuine max. I think you're, yeah, if you're maybe a beginner lifter or something where, say you're trying to squat snatch and your physiology or the way you're built would suggest to me maybe that you could lift 100 kilos and you're going for a 60 kilo squat snatch, then maybe I would say 6, because there's not going to be enough physiological cumulative fatigue to stop you from being able to move the weight from that perspective. But I always go with 3. If you've missed it 3 times and you're at the top end of your actual range, like, you're a pretty decent lifter, your 1 rep max is 120 on something and you're looking for 121, then yeah, I think 3's enough. But for me, 3 is always the golden rule. But I think go off feel. If you really, if it's in the tank or it's not. If you're videoing it and you're trying to clean and your pool is up to like your belly button, there's probably very little chance that a 4th attempt you're going to get it any higher than that. But if you pull and it's up to your neck and it's high enough and all you needed was a faster turnover or a better position from the ground or something, then I'd say, go for it and just Hail Mary it. Or, the alternative option is, which is what Pete does in my experience, is just go until the weight doesn't come off the floor anymore and just hope that you hit it. But it's not something I can recommend. But my personal opinion is I always go for 3. Okay, so next one, is media content creation helping or hindering athletes in sports? That's from Big Rob's Media. The man. Big question, I think. So again, I'll reframe it. Is media / content creation helping or hindering athletes and sports? It depends. So I think it depends on who the person is that's doing it. The sphere that we're in just now, everybody wants clicks, everybody wants watches, everybody wants shares. And to do that, you have to say quite jarring things, or you have to share things that are, use a weird word, magnificent. Okay, so if I'm creating content around someone who is, I don't know, Lasha 227 or whatever it is, snatch, if I'm posting content about something like that, does that help the majority of people? No, because you see a massive divide between A and B. I want to know what they think about Donald Trump. yeah, defo. So there is that. But then what you've got just now, and this might just be what's forced to me on my algorithm, is you've got people bashing on stuff, right? So you've got people that will bash on Hyrox, people that will bash on CrossFit, that will bash on someone's form, that will bashing on politics, bashing on blah, blah, blah. And I think that is a net negative for the sport and for athletes and for their respective sports overall. I do believe that that's a big negative. And I think creators that get pulled into that, it's nice because you get lots of clicks, lots of views. Some people even thrive off the hate of it. But I think when you're in that space, I think it's a net negative from that point of view. But I think that media and content creation needs to exist to help athletes in sports with where we're currently at. If you just started a sport today and decided I'm going to be off social media, where the fuck would your sport be? Or where would your athlete be? Or, it's the way that we consume information. It's the way that we consume things these days. So it's kind of impossible to get around. But yeah, I think as a whole, as it stands, it's probably net neutral. I think it's damaging on a lot of points, but I think it's also helping a lot of the athletes and a lot of the sports as they go along overall. So yeah, it's a tough one to tell, and I think it completely depends on the person and the content that they're actually creating. Okay, next one we've got VO2 max importance in CrossFit. Yeah. So more of a statement and a discussion topic. So it's not something that I pretend to be massively versed on. I know a lot about it, but I don't know how to apply it. I know how to develop it. The one thing I don't like is the ways to measure it, right? So what you need to be able to do with things like VO2 max is be able to measure them easily, to be able to measure how they develop and then how they display themselves in tests. So, for example, I'd want to say my VO max is here and I can do X set of exercises in X time. If I move my VO max to here, I can do X set of exercises in Y time. And if we can't measure it, if we can't measure it easily, we can't really attribute that to being the thing that made the development in that area. So that's the only reason why I don't really like it. It's obviously massively important, hugely important across the board, because it in every single study that you look at, it will display itself. When you look at specifically in high rocks, there's a lot of smart guys who will do functional tests, not necessarily just at high rocks, but they'll do functional tests, and then they will test VO2 max. They'll do a bunch of tests. The test output will be better. They'll test the VO2 max, and the VO2 max was better. So therefore, you can definitely make the assumption that VO2 max is important. But you develop it naturally by training in CrossFit anyway. So it's one of those things where it's kind of hard. Do you want to specifically develop that just to get better at CrossFit? My argument would be most people aren't at a high enough level to be finding inches like that. I think if you're just training CrossFit, you'll probably just get better at CrossFit. But it is massively important. But I just think there needs to be an easier means of being able to test it more regularly for it to be able to be more of a talking point, because otherwise it just feels a bit like fluff, because you can't talk directly to that being the thing that turned the dial on anything at all. So that's kind of that, and that was Lewis that asked that question. Now this is getting to the later parts of the question. This will be quite short, but we've got the question from Nat. Well, it's more of a statement that says everyone should test a high rocks. Okay, I agree. And so what I'll put on record here is that I don't dislike high rocks. I like it as a test, which is why I'm doing Glasgow, why I've done it in the past. I like the test. For me, if a CrossFitter isn't willing, doesn't have to go and do a race. You don't have to go away and pay millions of quid to go and do a race. I think just testing that, because to me, the crux of CrossFit is that you want to be as functionally fit across as many broad times and modal domains as humanly possible. You should be able to go and complete a high rocks in an average time if you are a well-rounded athlete. And I kind of, when I responded to this question last night, I said to Nat that asked it, I said, I don't think, because her point was no elite CrossFitters have gotten close to an elite high rockser's time. And I think if an elite CrossFitter got an elite time in high rocks, their training is wrong, or they aren't an elite CrossFitter, because at the core of it, to be an elite CrossFitter, you need to be above average at absolutely everything. Now, that gets on a different discussion of, does the games test well enough if it doesn't show up that error in training? But I think if somebody who thought of themselves as an elite CrossFitter, they went into high rocks and they got in amongst the elite 15, my argument would be you're too biased towards endurance and low skill, and you're not biased enough towards CrossFit. And again, I think if you look at the original journals and you look at the original point of CrossFit, in my head, the way that local CrossFit competitions or even slightly bigger CrossFit competitions are programmed, I think they are the people that win it are the best at CrossFit. I don't necessarily think they are the best CrossFitter by definition. And that's because if you had 4 or 5 tests only that were short, heavy, fast output, then you're very good at those things and you probably wouldn't necessarily display a good time at high rocks. And I know it's a strange way to look at it because everybody wants to be better at high rocks, but if you think you are a generalist and you're being a generalist, you should be able to get an above average time in a high rocks, an above average time at a powerlifting competition, an above average placement at a strongman competition, an above average blah 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 blah, above average at all things but not a specialist at anything. And so when that says everyone should test the high rocks, I completely agree with that. I do. And whenever I talk about high rocks, it's not the test of fitness that I ever bash on. It's the training for it because people want to be hybrid generalist, all this type of stuff. But by training just for a high rocks, you're degrading the quality of other stuff. You're degrading the quality of your lifting. You're degrading the quality of your skills. You're degrading all of that stuff. There is a leveler. So when people say they should test it, I wholeheartedly agree. If you consider yourself somebody who is wanting to be good as a generalist or wanting to be a good overall athlete, you should go and test it. It's a large, good, well-rounded test, standards aside, a good, large, well-rounded test that tests that area of your fitness. So I completely agree. It's the training for it that I think degrades everything else. So that's my opinion on it. I think everyone should test them at least once because it's a good test. It's set up well. It's fucking expensive, but it's a good test. It's set up well. It has enough in it. I've done it. If you consider yourself to be a good athlete, you should be able to complete it with no real issue, not place very high, but do quite well and feel good. And that way you can tick off that box and say, I've got that, that longer, slightly more endurance running part. I've got it. My training is going well. If, however, you consider yourself to be a good CrossFitter and you show up at a high rocks and it absolutely shafts you and you can't run for more than 100 meters and your heart's falling at your ass, you're probably not training correctly. Hybrid athletes should also do powerlifting with weightlifting. So this was my exact response last night to that. I said the week in the middle of March where I've got pro solo high rocks on a Wednesday, open doubles on the Thursday, the Fife strongest man strongman competition on the Saturday, and it's the final week of the open. So that week for me, if I can place top 25% in the open, middle table in the strongman comp against the strongman specialists, and decently average at the pro solo, for me, what I do and the way that I train is more efficient than most. Now, you look at any of those outcomes in a silo and they're unimpressive, right? I mean unimpressive on a scale of it's not elite 15, it's not semifinals, it's not podium in the strongman comp. But get anybody from any of the other areas that smashed me in them and get them to do the other thing, they would probably be at a much lesser place than I would be. And so that's what I'm trying to get at. To Jake's point there is that being able to do a powerlifting comp and being able to do a strongman comp and being able to do a high rocks and being able to place well in the open and being able to do all this thing, that is the ultimate, in my head, hybrid athlete, rather than being able to just run a lot and lift a little bit. There's too many things missing from it, particularly in the skill development side, which I'm not even getting into. I just mean from a pure strength output, pure power output, long endurance, short form, everything in between. You should be able to do that. And I'm not necessarily, backing myself to say I'm going to do well because my training's been shit for a while, but I just think that is what everybody should be able to do. So back to the original thing of everyone should test the high rocks. Yes. And everyone should test a powerlifting comp and a strongman comp and Olympic lifting comp and a CrossFit comp and a swimming comp and a running and a biathlon and a triathlon, all these things, right? Not with the hope to win them or place in the top X%, but in the place to be able to complete them, feel good about it with not much issue. So yes, I agree. Everyone should test a high rocks, but I don't think everybody should change their training to train for high rocks. There we go. That was a lot of words. I'll have to try and dig a clip out of that somehow. We'll see how that goes. Okay, now I've got 2 questions left. The next one, I've had this question loads of times actually. So, would you ever open your own gym, aka Rainer Fitness? Lol. this is off the back of a conversation I had with somebody about people who have, let's use Jake Chapman as the golden thing. So let's say he goes, I'm going to open a gym called Jake Chapman Fitness. In doing that, I understand how that works. You take on a few PT clients, and then you say, I need a bigger space and I want to run classes. So then it would be Jake Chapman classes. What you're saying is the thing that I do, right? So I'm using CrossFit as a litmus test, but there's a million different things. You've got fucking F45 and all these different things that are much bigger than a single person. What you're saying by default is that the thing I do is better, or the outputs are better than what I can gain from being part of a group thing over here, right? So that's why you think you're saying it. And I can only think the reasons for that would be potentially ego, maybe, or just you just want to have your own little thing. If you just want to have your own little thing, I think there has to be an acceptance of it's probably not as good as these things over here. So I could go to Jake Chapman Fitness and I'm going to get his flavor of what he does. Is it going to be the most effective thing? No. How do I know that? Because his only studies and his only use cases are the people that have been to Jake Chapman Fitness. Okay. Whereas something like CrossFit, even I'm even bringing in F45. I'm even bringing in all those things. As the testing pool or the points of data get bigger and bigger and bigger, you've got more proof of concept the thing that you do works. And so personally, I would just never double down on myself. It's because I don't know better. CrossFit, the way it's built, the way it works, has more points of data. This video I posted the other day where I like black and white, ones and zeros, no gray areas. It's not just guesswork. If I get Mary in off the street, I'm not going to say that what I can do as Stephen Rayner Fitness is better than what CrossFit can do, or better than what F45 can do, or better than what a High Rocks compete class can do, or because there's just not enough data. The sample size is too small. So there's two sides to it. One is ego. That's why I don't have a big enough ego to put my own name on a gym. I don't think. And the second one is there isn't enough proof of concept. I could be the best in the world at it, but I'd have to have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people come through the door and me to get fantastic results for me to even think about being able to compete with something like CrossFit. So that's why I would never do it. And I just think there's so many positives to being part of something bigger than negatives, right? It's nice for people who don't know much about the fitness realm to look at it and say, oh, fucking hell, his name's on the door. He must be class at this. Like that must be cool, right? I came up with this thing that's all singing, all dancing, because the majority of people don't know the difference, right? The majority of newbies, they can't tell the difference. They just think that guy does this thing. My pal goes there in their class, so therefore I'll go, and that must be better than that thing that's got loads of people in it. Not necessarily true, but it's not something I would ever do. The only realm I would ever do that is if it was like a small, very small boutique personal training facility. Then it might have my name on it. But that's me not saying this is my type of fitness. That's just me saying it's personable to me and I'm just doing this thing. And even in that case, I'd probably still be saying, and by the way, I use CrossFit as a mechanism for that. So yeah, that's kind of that one. I think that covers that. Would you ever open your own gym? No, I wouldn't do that. Is the biggest one to that. And then I've lost the last question. So this one I didn't really get. This one, another one from Rob's. So he says, is the short period brackets open plus games a negative on pushing CrossFit forward, certainly versus High Rocks? So I guess we mean then the High Rocks quote unquote season. I don't know how the fuck that's meant to work, because the season seems to go on for an entire year, but they're like, oh, downtime and then it's race season again. I don't know. It seems to go on all year, but so I'm going to go with, I think it's a negative on pushing CrossFit forward against if there was something that happened on a very regular basis. Sure, I would agree with that. But as far as what we do in it being a very large test at one point of the year, I like it. CrossFitters aren't dogs. We don't have seasons. Well, yes. But I do kind of half agree with there being tests throughout the year, and I think because people don't, there's two sides to it. There are enough ways to test yourself, not on like a leaderboard or an ongoing whatever, apart from WFP, which obviously isn't CrossFit. But outside of that, there are ways to test yourself through the year between the Open and the Games, because the majority of people will call it functional fitness or any of that type of stuff that isn't CrossFit. They don't really link the two together. But really, you can continue your quote unquote season on for the bulk of people through the year. You can go and compete at all these types of things. I think there would probably need to be more of a buy-in to these functional comps and all this type of stuff being a CrossFit licensed event thing for people to link the two together. Debatable. I need more info, Rubs. How many people sign up for BF3? Yeah, there is that. There is the international functional fitness stuff and British functional fitness and all that. But I think it could be done relatively easily. Robs, that'd be my thought. I think it wouldn't be difficult to get enough people to buy into CrossFit, to put on things that were CrossFit spectacles through and through. You think back a few years, there was way more CrossFit licensed events that went on through the year, and you can extend the season. But when the bulk of it lives, the bulk of HQ and the bulk of the way that CrossFit works lives in America, we just see it from the bleachers. We all join in on the Open and it's fantastic. It's a big push, but then it is quite quiet for the rest of the time. But you've seen them try to do things, the affiliate cup, and that all just falls on its ass. I think it would be really up to, if you wanted to do it in the UK specifically, it would have to be something that had a lot of buy-in with a lot of big hitters and a lot of big names. But yeah, I think it is. I imagine in a mad world, right? An operation the size of CrossFit isn't a sport, but yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe that's not the mechanism in which it grows, is not the test, because it isn't a sports methodology. Yeah. But I mean, CrossFit Games seems to be in the eye really from March. Games Harrods is constant. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And I think that comes down to, at the end of the day, Hyrox as a Hyrox HQ and as a media team and as a business, they do a better job of promoting what they do. They have an easy way of doing it because they have constant events that continue on all the time. So it makes it much easier for them, but they just simply do a better job of it, right? CrossFit Games is an event like Hyrox, it is, but they just, yeah, they do a better job of it. We would just have to come at it from a slightly different angle. CrossFit isn't the CrossFit Games. Yeah. Yeah, true. But it does do wonders for promoting the sport. Maybe it's because even if you were to extend that out, Robs, the skill gap is so big between like games athletes and normal humans. Because again, I'll come back to anybody can complete a Hyrox. They're different things. It's a big thing to get into. I guess that my overarching theme to the whole thing is HQ and CrossFit as a whole could do more in the time between the games and between the Open to get to the forefront of people's screens. I think, yeah, I would agree with that. Hyrox have it nailed because they can do that on and on and on and on and on. Yeah, nice convo topic. It's just, what does it look like? Because you've got this thing that you can just go to anywhere in the world. Not just the waiting for game season to start. No, waiting for game season to start and finish 3 millionth in the Open. Aye, class. Aye, well, there we go. Well, that was the end of my questions. So unless, Jake, you want to give me a couple of extra conversation topics, I've got another like 10 minutes. Then I might call it that. We've had anywhere between 6 and 3 viewers, which is a decent, a decent wee start for a Q&A. But I feel like I've rambled enough that now this stuff won't spew over into my thought process for the rest of the week, which is always helpful for me. I think if you compare CrossFit HQ versus Hyrox HQ promotion, CrossFit, mate, massively. I agree, and you've got the argument that Hyrox is a race, but they've just found their thing that they can promote. They smash it. They smash it. I think the problem is that when you scratch the surface, to Jake's point, it's a race. It's not a training methodology. So from a positive point of view, and in my head, imagine the best case, you get loads of people to start training for high rocks and they start training overall and they just train for it. It's obviously not the best use of their time. We know this. Um, so yeah, they're much better at promoting people to get them into the race. Hmm. There's a yeah, okay, let's go to that. Yeah, but you're right. Harrods, the HQ do a much better job, and they've just found what they can do. I think CrossFit need to spend more time finding what it is that they can push, and it is pushing the affiliates, and it is pushing the methodology, and it is pushing what they can do. So yeah, no, totally, they do a better job at it. Be nice to see what HQ could do with that. We've got so much more because all the here's a statement: all they've got is a race. We've got everything. Life-changing ability to make people live longer, join communities that stop them killing themselves. Like, it's so much bigger than what they've got. We've got much more to promote, so it needs to be promoted better between the game season. Because yeah, it comes to the forefront at games time because it's impressive and it's the open and it's all this type of stuff. Okay, nice. Right. So from Jake, does the phrase "as long as they're moving and enjoying themselves" move people toward or away from the gold standard of training? Hmm. Very much away. I both love and hate this statement. I think it should be prefaced or suffixed or affixed, whatever, with "as long as they're moving and enjoying themselves occasionally." No worries, Rob. See you later on, man. As long as they're moving and enjoying themselves occasionally, right? So, or even as long as they're moving and enjoying themselves at the same time as meeting a standard that develops them towards X, Y, and Z. Right? That's the way that's the way I would see it. But I think that this statement overall does quite a lot of damage for what we want to do because just training just for the moving part, you're not doing what we have you in the gym to be able to do, which is develop towards being a better version of yourself that's fitter, faster, stronger, more powerful, more skillful, and so on and so forth. So I think if you sit with the standard of it's fine as long as they're moving and enjoying themselves, you're never going to be in a place where you actually develop adaptation to anything. I do think that sometimes there is a place for this, but as a whole, no, I think it's bad. And I'd referenced a gym that I've seen quite a bit, and this is their whole mantra. It's all fluffy and nice because it sells better. It's easier for me to sell you on you're going to get an ego fluff if you're in the gym and you're sweating and I'm telling you that that is fine. You look to me as the professional, right? You look to me or you look to your gym owner or you look to your coach as the person who knows what they're talking about. So I have this goal. I want to complete this goal. And the goal is I want to feel better, look better, all this type of stuff. I come to you and I say, I want to do all of these things. You say, and I say to you, if you're in my gym, as long as you're enjoying yourselves and moving, perfect. No, there's a misalignment between the goal you came to me with and the solution I've just given you. Just moving and just enjoying yourself isn't going to provide you the outcomes that you came to me in the first place for. So, as a marketing standpoint, and even as an ongoing strategy for how you run a place, that's dog shit, right? It doesn't work and it doesn't align with the reason you came to me in the first place. But you're going to trust me as the professional to say that that is fine, that you are just moving and that you are enjoying yourselves because you said, I'm the professional. I told you that doing these two things, enjoying yourself and having fun, are going to get you to the goals you came to me with. Tick box, done. You're going to then approach everything without the need to develop adaptation, without the need to hit the stimulus that I've told you that you need to hit and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I think it's shit, but it sells a lot more. It's easier to sell. I can avoid challenge if you can't really be bothered to squat to depth, if you can't really be bothered to get your heart rate through the roof, if you can't really be asked to hit a time cap. And I say, that's fine. How much easier is that for me? The athlete feels like they've done what they should have done because I said that that was an acceptable standard. I don't have to challenge you. There doesn't have to be a back and forth. Nobody needs to get upset because I'm no repping them. It is what it is. I think it's a coward's way out of everything. But I will prefix that with, I think that there is a case for it sometimes. If you've had massive, and it's occasionally, let's say it's a Tuesday, you're a bit run down, you've had fucking death in the family, and you've just lost your job, your wife's shagging a milkman, right? Let's assume there's probably not much chance of you doing much from an adaptation point of view under those circumstances. Extreme circumstances every so often. And so moving and enjoying yourself is better in that singular instance than doing nothing. But where that breeds is that feels nice, it feels good, it's safe. You moved, you sweated, but you didn't do what we're trying to do. So I think there's the very occasional time where that is fine, but as an overarching theme, it's pants, and it does not do what we want to do. So there we go. Right, we've got two more. What's this one? So, which is smarter, 50-year business model, creating an affiliate model that requires no real direct influence, recertification, or annual in-house competition with godlike superstars and thousands of entrepreneurs, or creating a £110 90-min race that requires no gyms or grosses 2 billion every race? Yes, absolutely. It is a business. It's a business. There's no better way to put it. And I talk about things like Athex, mainly just Athex. When I went, those things feel soulless. They're so removed from it being a true test of fitness. There's an argument to say it's a pretty decent test across what it's got, but it feels soulless. It lacks purpose. I just think if, when Glassman was in his heyday, right? You take owner of Athex, don't know who it is. What's happening, Sleepyhead? If you take the owner of Athex and I had 500 million quid, and I said, I'm going to give you 500 million quid today to chuck this. I can, without knowing anything about him, I reckon he'd chuck it in a heartbeat. And he'd say, absolutely. If you offered that to Glassman in the heyday of when CrossFit was taking off with all this backing, there's no way he would have. And to take your personal opinions on him to the side. Yeah, Ollie, right? Exactly, right? It's March on, isn't it? So yeah, if you said here's this amount of money, he'd back it, he'd chuck it, right? Because there's not a greater goal afoot there than testing at that one point and making a whole bunch of bank in the middle. So Glassman would never have done that. He just wouldn't have, regardless of whether he needed the money or not. He wouldn't. Something like Ollie doesn't need it either, but he would take it. And I'm potentially speaking out of turn, but I just know that they would, and that's just what it feels like. And maybe that's just a miss on what they want it to feel like, and maybe I'm biased when I approach it, and that's not what it feels like for everybody. But if you compare it to something like Proving Grounds being a perfect example, I've not been to many further away competitions apart from regionals back in the day and stuff to just spectate. But it's not, there isn't a greater purpose afoot. It's just pay for my competition and do my competition and make a massive amount of money and disappear. So yeah, what a time to be alive. Okay, right, cool. I think I'm going to call it there and hop off. That was fun for me to spew thoughts on some stuff, and these I can squeeze in quite regularly, so whether there's only a couple of people watching, and obviously they'll be quite good for clips as well, so I will do this more often. But thanks for 5 of you, which I think is probably Jake, Yon, Steve, and my mum, so that's class. But yeah, I'll get some clips out of this, and if anybody's got any other questions, I'll put up another question box next week before I do this for event. So as always, if anybody wants to chat about anything, give me a shout externally to this, and I can either answer them on here or answer them with you in conversations. All right. Okay, lovely chatting. Bye-bye.